That's Ian Moore, Johnny Moeller, and Jesse Drayton, collectively known as the Texas Headhunters. Their debut album is just out, and so we found Jesse in Austin, Texas, where he tells us why he considers Clifford Antone to be the spiritual godfather of this project.
I had done that record with Samantha Fish, and Samantha and I had spent 17 months together, flying around the world. And, you know, it was at that point, it was the most successful record either one of us had done.
Right.
And, you know, we got nominated for a Grammy, and I had this record that was a solo record that Shooter Jennings produced. And, you know, we were kind of thinking, what was I going to do next? And me and my manager were talking. He was like, you know, he's got this really thick New Orleans accent. He's like, y'all got to get something together down in Texas, get that blues sound, man. And I was like, yeah, I'll call Johnny Moeller and Ian Moore, because I had been listening to this record called Showdown from the 80s.
Right.
It was a blues record. It had Robert Cray, Albert Collins, and Johnny Copeland.
Not bad.
And it was all three of them. And then there was another record out of Austin called Big Guitars from Texas that had Don Leddy and a bunch of other, you know, cool players on it. And, you know, the thing about me and Ian and Johnny is we were all discovered by Clifford Antone when we were kids.
Cool.
So we've all known each other. You know, Clifford found, I think Johnny's dad dropped him off at the club when he was like 16. You know, Johnny was from like North Texas.
Right.
And then he found me when I was 15 in a club in Beaumont, Texas on the Louisiana border. And then he of course he was good friends with Ian's dad. And so, you know, I think Ian knew him like since he was a little kid. Like,
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of, you know, the backstory on it. So a lot of this stuff is also for, you know, the memory of Clifford.
Cool. Yep. Because Antone's is the place to go. Really, I've been there a few times back in the day. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So when the three of you did get together, what kind of discussion did you have about what kind of record you wanted to make here?
Well, it was interesting because we knew we wanted to make a blues-based record. And, you know, for them, for Johnny and Ian, that was no big deal. For me, you know, I'd been operating in all these other genres. And, you know, like I said, you know, Clifford found me at a club in Beaumont when I was 15, and he gave me like all these records by all these people who were from around my area.
Right.
Which was mind-blowing to me. You know, I would have never, if I wouldn't have met Clifford, I would have been a totally different, you know, I would have been just your average kid listening to, you know, Clapton on the radio or whatever. Right. And, you know, he told me, he goes, man, I'm going to give you this record. This is from Slim Harpo. He's right down the road from you in Crowley, Louisiana. And I'm going to give you this, you know, Lightning Hopkins record. And he's from East Texas. I'm going to give you this Mance Lipscomb record. And, you know, all these guys that were like literally a stone's throw away from where I grew up.
Crazy.
And Johnny Winter, you know, lived 2 blocks away from us. The Winter brothers did.
Right.
And so, yeah, we used to see him at the Dairy Queen all the time. And that was back when only sailors and bikers had tattoos. So,
yeah.
But yeah, so that was kind of when I came to this thing, I was kind of spearheading it to make it an outlet for a Texas blues record. And, you know, Johnny's kind of the real traditionalist among the three of us,
right.
You know, he's been playing in the Thunderbirds now, I think longer than Jimmy did originally.
Right, right.
and Ian's always had his toe, in the blues. He's a blues based player, but Ian's got all these other rock and psychedelic influences, and Ian was it was a star in the '90s. He had songs on the radio in America all
Right.
over. He was touring with the opening for the Stones, and touring with ZZ Top. So um, that's kind of the direction of the record. It was just full blown Texas blues.
Yeah. Because your background, I just saw you mentioned tattoos, and I think I saw an X tattoo on your forearm there. So you're more of a punk of the group. Would that be fair to say? You played with X.
Well, I mean, I the first gig I played on out of high school, I played on one of the last Waylon Jennings
Oh,
records.
well, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, because I was from Beaumont, Texas, which is the most hillbilly out of all these guys.
Gotcha.
So I grew up, a lot of country music. But, when you say that country music to rock fans, they immediately think the cheesy stuff that came
Sure.
along later.
Yep. Well,
But,
I grew up in rural Pennsylvania in the 1960s, and I hated country music, or at least I thought I did, because that's, what I,
yeah,
but now
sure.
I
Well, I
love
mean,
this stuff now, but now you got to get educated.
yeah, you do. And, culturally, it's always been a little more right wing. And,
Yeah.
there's a lot to it, that I didn't care for as a kid, and I rebelled against it. But,
Yeah.
my parents were going to see Willie and Waylon at the Armadillo World headquarters, which is a very, very different experience, my friend, than going to some uptight country and western show. I mean,
Absolutely.
everybody was smoking weed, everybody had long hair, people were tripping. There were cowboys, there were Hell's Angels, there were tons of hippies everywhere. And I got that gig with Waylon, and then of course then I went on and I played with Johnny Cash and played with Willie and played with Chris, and ended up playing with all these classic country guys who at that point, this was right before Johnny Cash kind of Rick Rubin kind of
Gotcha. Yeah.
reinvented Johnny Cash's career.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
That was before everybody was walking around with Johnny flipping the bird with a shirt on,
From San Quentin. Yeah.
and and but I had always been, involved in rock and roll and rockabilly and punk rock and all the blues stuff. I was always into, but
Sure.
Clifford tried to make me a blues star, and I was getting offers to play guitar for people for a lot more money than playing at Tuesday nights at Anton's.
Right. Gotcha. Yeah, I hear you.
So
Uh,
I was the least I was the broke kid from the little hillbilly town that needed to go make some money. So but I also played in all black Zydeco bands when I was a kid. The first record I ever played on was a Rock and Doopsie record.
oh, geez. All right. That's pretty cool. So on this record, do you guys write the songs together or separate? Do you bring your stuff in that you had laying around? I think one of Maggie went back to Mineola as one of yours. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. That one's got the full on, East Texas ZZ Top
Definitely.
70s vibe. We all three of us kneel at the altar of the Reverend Billy Gibbons.
She was dancing her way through Dallas, just trying to survive the scene. Saw her in the alley behind the club, left off with some dude in a limousine. Ain't no sense in trying to hold you, ain't no way we could ever control you. Maggie moved back to Mineola.
He's probably our biggest hero. I mean, especially in Beaumont, because Frank, the drummer, hung out in Beaumont all the time, and we were like, but we all kind of wrote songs ourselves. We brought them to the session, and then we all just played all over each other's songs.
Right.
So, you hear that lead on Maggie Went Back to Mineola. That's Ian Moore playing the lead.
Yeah.
And we're not precious about it, and it's a killer show, man. It is. I mean, I can't wait for these blues fans to find out about this record and hear it.
Right.
Because we're at that age now. We're all I'm in my late 50s. I'm 59, right?
Yeah.
And we're at that age where we're some of the last guitar players to be influenced by people who grew up right around where we were playing, from the original OG legends.
Yep.
And to take this music and get those classic sounds. And I'm just excited to get out and play this stuff. Festival promoters are starting to call. They're starting to find out the record comes out this Friday.
Yeah.
And by the way, great news for us. We recouped our recording budget before the record came out.
How'd that happen? You made money? Yeah, or you didn't lose money making music? How is this possible
Exactly.
in this day and age?
What we did was we did limited vinyl, and we pre-ordered. We did where you could pre-order the record,
right?
And we went in and made the record for a pretty good amount of money. I won't disclose that because the label will get pissed off at me, but it was a pretty good amount of money. And they called me like last Friday, and they said, "You're not going to believe this, but you've recouped your record deal for this record already with pre-sales."
Nice one. Well, no,
so we're super excited about it, and I can't wait for people to see this show.
Yeah. So my understanding is you recorded the record in just like about 5 days at Willie Nelson's studio. What were those sessions like? Was it pretty loose? Was it tight? Was it tense? Was it fun?
It was very loose, man. It was very loose. I mean, everybody was in the room. We did very few. It's interesting to talk about this stuff because you're older than I am, so that all the great records that we grew up listening to were recorded with all the people in the studio at the same time.
Sure.
Usually with very few overdubs, unless you're listening to something like Pink Floyd or Fleetwood Mac, where they took 8 months to make the record,
right.
But most of the records that that we loved growing up, whoever it was, they didn't make them. They made them like very few overdubs. And so when I tell people that, especially younger people, they're like, we didn't fly any tracks in. We didn't fix anything in Pro Tools. We didn't have to do any of that stuff. Like, this is an old school record. We went in and really recorded the record in 4 days and then give ourselves another day to like fix anything,
right?
Which wasn't much. We knocked off early that day. So I'd worked out at Willie's studio a bunch, and when I was a kid, I would go out there and record all the time. And so I was real happy that we got to do that. And yeah, it's powerful, man.
Yeah. We got an artist here. Her name is Tammy Nielsen, who recorded with Willie last year sometime or other they did a duet together. And I think she did some dates with him as well, played at his picnic or something. So Willie's influence reaches far.
Yes.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is your plan going forward? Is Texas Headhunters a one-off thing? Do you see it continuing on? What's your feeling about it?
We get along really great. I mean, there's no, ego or anything like that. And plus we're just older now, so we don't really care as much. I mean,
right.
We're not chasing women and going on drug binges, and it's like we're all settled in with our gals and our life, and we're really there to play guitar. So when we're on the stage together, man, it's this healthy competition that we get together, and any night, one of us could just dust the floor with the other two, And it just depends on what happens, and we never know what's going to happen. So it makes it exciting for the crowd. But my goal is to keep doing this. I want to keep putting out records, with our quote unquote side band, and see what happens. Because hell, if we can do that record in 4 or 5 days and in our sleep without even trying, there's no telling what we do if we actually put some work and planned on it.
Yeah, well, doesn't sound like a throw off effort. It sounds like just turn it up and have a good time. It's great. I like See Round Corners because it's got kind of 50s R&B feel to it, which is a little bit away from the blues thing. Where did that one come from? Do you know?
I'm seeing around corners, baby. I can see everything before it all goes down. Yes, I'm seeing around corners, baby. I can see everything before it all goes down. Like some old movie playing in my mind. Well, I see you loving some other man way uptown.
Well, that one's got that classic 6/8 Gulf Coast, sound to it. I call it the roller rink beat, know, because when we used to go to the roller rink and we go skating, and you would hear these songs, by all these bands, these old school bands that, I don't know if your listeners are heard of them, but there's a show band called the Boogie Kings, and they would have all these beats that went, and then the whole world went crazy over that, and then you had I Can Help, which was by Billy Swan.
Yep.
Which was a big roller rink song. You had Magnet and Steel by a guy named Walter Egan.
That's right. That's a great one.
Fleetwood Mac backing him up.
Yep.
You had Let Me Roll It by Paul McCartney, and they were all kind of doing their best, like kind of Cajun swamp pop thing, And, being from Beaumont, I wrote that song. Plus, I just thought the line was cool. I met this old brother, after a show one night, and he was like, "Oh, man, I had to run her off, man." I was like, "Why? What happened?" He's like, "Oh, man, I got a bad thing. I can see around corners."
Yeah.
And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, I could see what she was doing. She didn't know what I was doing, but I'm seeing around corners." And I was like, "Oh my God, I got to write that song right now." So.
If you enjoyed this episode of the 13th Floor's Music Talk series, please be sure to subscribe to the website or to the YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook or Instagram and wherever you find your podcasts. There's a whole lot more to discover.